Hello, economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. My name is Nick Pallavita. I'll be your moderator with our panelists today discussing a very important topic. And for those who haven't seen it yet or have it yet, there is a book out there called America in 2040, Still a Superpower, by the Honorable David M. Walker. It's a book that you should all have in your library. And from what we understand, there's a new updated version coming out. Now, with that, of course, it discusses the most important topic of the United States of America that continually is being ignored by both political parties. That's the growing national debt. Recent surveys said our national debt will increase $1 trillion every 100 days. It will bankrupt us before we can do anything about climate change. Social Security and Medicare are also going broke, which creates a big strain because it looks like AARP is saying, hey, well, if Social Security goes broke and Medicare goes broke, we're just going to look to the federal government to subsidize us. But the federal government is broke. So this is a major problem. And of course, my proposal to help solve the immigration problem of the United States of America is attack fees on people that come through the border. In other words, just like when I fly on airplanes, I can fly first class, economy, premium economy. Well, if you come through the border, you have $100,000, you go in through the first class door. If you have 10,000, you go in through the economy door. If you have $1,000, you go on the wait list. And that's just the way it is. And use that money to solve some of America's problems, which is basically that we're broke. But we're not looking to solve problems. We're looking to create more debt. And with that, we're going to bring in before the panel the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, who pointed out this problem years ago. But as things get worse, it may be just too late to solve the problem. It looks like neither one of our political parties are interested in solving this problem. So with that, the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. I hear you have a new book coming out, or an updated version, David?
Yeah, Nick, thank you very much. I have an updated version coming out, and people need to be careful to make sure that if they're going to order it, that they're ordering the updated version. It will say at the top, updated through December 2023. The initial publisher of the book, Author House, has not taken down the old book yet, and I'm taking steps to make sure that they do take it down. The new book is available, but you got to make sure that you're not buying the old book. And I expect that this will all get resolved here within the next week or so. But basically what I've done is, you recall, the book was originally published in September of 2020, and a lot has happened since then. And I hope that one of the things that we can do in this session is to kind of talk about some of the things that have happened. But the bottom line is, as you recall, I posit the case that in order to become a superpower, you have to have global economic power, global international influence, global military capabilities, and global cultural influence. And clearly we did at that point in time, and we were dominant after World War II, but we're losing market share, we're losing position. And what I posited was that the number one factor on the way up as a superpower and the number one factor on the way down as a superpower is economic power. And if you can't put your finances in order, you will not maintain economic power, because no country, including the United States, is exempt from the laws of prudent finance. And I painted a picture of what things could look like in 2040 if we don't change course. So that was the wake-up call. And then I gave a call to action as to what do we need to do in order to create a better future, and then had specific proposed solutions, most of which had been tested by representative groups of voters with 77 to 97% support in order to be able to put our finances in order, deal with some national security, homeland security threats, and other domestic tranquility challenges. But unfortunately, things have gotten a lot worse since then. And I think what I would suggest is one of the things we may want to do is kind of take it topic by topic and go through it. We can do that as part of the panel or whatever you think is appropriate. But let's just say that financially we're much worse off. Let's just say that from a national security standpoint, we're worse off. From an international stability standpoint, we're worse off. And from a cultural perspective, we've never been more divided. And yet this year is is a very important year for a variety of reasons, including the fact that we have national elections. And as you know, this morning the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that Connecticut's attempt to try to take former President Trump off the ballot was unconstitutional. And there will be several more cases that the Supreme Court is going to have to decide in the coming months dealing with the election and dealing with the former president. So we live in interesting times, which is interesting, but in China, it's a curse.
Okay. Just a second. Okay. The thing is, what we'll do is we'll bring in our panel right now. We have panel from all over the United States who are going to be coming in. We're going to bring in Rick Grosner from California. He has joined us. Dan Worthington from Utah has joined us, and also Kim Calhoun from the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina has joined us. So let's start with Rick since he has his hand up. What are your thoughts? America
Question for Dave. Say it's 2040 and we haven't gotten our act together. How does that impact, say somebody gets up, 8 a.m., 2040, has their morning coffee. What is their day? What are the three major impacts to their day based on us not getting our financial house in order?
A lot higher unemployment. So depending upon what the person's age is and depending upon what their occupation is, they may or may not be employed. Secondly, the value of the dollar will be much less. Thirdly, the social safety net will have been shred, which will create, additional tensions and domestic tranquility problems. Our adversaries overseas will be emboldened, and our ability to provide much needed leadership in international affairs will have been undercut. Our ability to be able to prevent aggression by authoritarian leaders will be significantly diminished. It will not be a pretty picture, Rick, but here's the important thing. The important thing is that while I paint a picture of what could be the case, and by the way, former Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, good friend of mine, Bill Owens, agrees with it, that it's a plausible scenario. The whole point is it doesn't have to be that way. And the answer to the question, American 2040 still a superpower question mark, is yes, if we end up taking the steps outlined in the book, and no, unless we take the steps outlined in the book. And so it is not all negative. I mean, I think there's no question that we can turn this thing around, but we need to get started sooner rather than later.
I want to add something. We'll be putting that book in our bookstore, so you will be able to find the updated version. I'm certain Mark will be updating that today. So you'll be able to find the updated version. We will remove the other version out of our bookstore, so there will be no mistake. Also, when you look for it on Amazon, you will see the difference between it. It's saying that this has been updated on February 14th. It's in big bold letters underneath the title. So look for that as well, so that you do not purchase the wrong book. And I'm going to purchase mine from our bookstore and then go up and get David to sign it for me, because Nick knows I don't like any books on my bookshelf unless they're signed. But, David, we're talking about what it's taking to become a superpower. We're so divided. It's America divided right now, not united. And I think the biggest strength that we could have right now, we talk about the different things we can do, like more honesty and things like that. I just don't think any of the honesty is going to come out from any of the politicians. I think we need to find somebody who can unite us. I think that that's going to be very important in order to start enforcing some of the policies, creating policies that need to be changed, or, managing the policies in general, just finding some ethics and getting morally legal. Right now, I learned a new rule last week, morally illegal. And I think that a lot of what's going on is just morally wrong. It's not illegal, but it's morally illegal. And I think that we need to unite again. I think that's just going to be a very powerful, very powerful situation for someone if they can unite us.
Well, let me come back on that. I would respectfully suggest that there's three levels of that we need to be focusing on. The floor of acceptable behavior is the law. One level above that is ethics. And another level above that at the pinnacle is morality. And we have too many people that are crawling on the floor and making arguments that it's not illegal, even though it may be, rather than reaching for the ceiling, recognizing that your responsibility as a leader is not just to do what's legal, but to do what's ethically and morally right. At the same point in time, we need to understand the difference between the law, which the government sets, and personal morality. You can't legislate morality, okay? And that's a particularly important issue when you're dealing with controversial issues like abortion. And I don't know that we want to get into that, but now unity, you're right. We are very divided right now. The Republican Party has gone too far right. The Democratic Party has gone too far left. The so-called sensible center right, center left. I think most people in this country are fiscally responsible and more and socially tolerant. Okay, but that segment of the population, which is clearly a majority of the population, is largely unrepresented, which is one of the reasons that No Labels, of which I'm a national co-founder of, may run a third option for president and vice president that would be comprised of people who are in the sensible center from different party affiliations, committed to a specific agenda of action to solve problems on issues that the American people care about. And we're going to have to make a decision on that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Super Tuesday's tomorrow. That's going to be significant. But within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll know whether there's a third option or not.
Do you consider RFK Jr. sensible? To me, as a liberal, he seems like a loony.
I would say RFK Jr. is not likely to be the person that No Labels would select to be at the top of the ticket for a variety of reasons. But RFK Jr. has a following. There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, he's got an iconic name. In addition to that, he's clearly non-traditional. Young people, are attracted to him for a variety of reasons. But I do not think that he's likely to be the No Labels presidential candidate if we decide to run a ticket.
If y'all decide to run a ticket, can I throw out two names and see if they are names that you would consider and all along the lines? Because I've heard them mentioned as potentials. Well, one I've heard mentioned as potential. The other hasn't been mentioned as a potential, but it's going to throw his name out there. But would you consider, because these are from different sides of the spectrum, even though they are both African Americans, but would y'all consider either Cornel West or Reverend Barber as potential candidates and all along those lines and all in that space? Because they definitely both have strong followings, and definitely, like I said, they represent different extremes of the political spectrum. But I just wondered whether y'all would consider that.
Without commenting on particular individuals, let me talk to you about what I think the criteria need to be, and then you can apply the criteria to any person you want and decide whether or not you think they meet the criteria. The first criteria is the person has to have CEO level experience. It doesn't have to be in the government, but it could be in the government, could be in the private sector, it could be in the not-for-profit sector, because the fact of the matter is the President of the United States is the chief executive officer of the largest and most important entity on the face of the earth. It's not a legislative job, it's an executive job, all right? If they have legislative experience, that's great. Secondly, they have to have a proven track record of working on a bipartisan basis, as Kim said, to unify, to bring people together to get things done. Thirdly, they have to have a commitment to the common sense agenda. You can find it on nolabels.org, 30 items that are of concern to the American people, and a way forward to try to address those items. They've got to be committed to, a results-oriented campaign. Fourthly, Ideally, they would have some military experience, but that's not required. That's a preference. It's not a requirement, if you will. Fifthly, they've got to have the communication skills, okay, to be able to connect with the American people and to stimulate enthusiasm and interest and be able to raise money as a result of that fact, okay. And sixthly, I would say they've got to be a person of unquestioned integrity. Unquestioned integrity. Now, importantly, Mark, it has to be a unity ticket, which means the person who's at the top can't have the same prior political affiliation as the person who's VP. All right. And so if there's a former Republican on top, it's got to be a former Democrat or an independent, or vice versa, independent or Democrat on top and Republican on the bottom. So those are the criteria, and I think it's important that we stick with those criteria if you want to have a chance to win. And we don't want to run a candidate unless we think there's a pathway to victory in the Electoral College.
Can I just ask a follow-up question really quick? And I'll probably be quiet for a while and everything, but
Sure. No.
There is definitely been some conversation, and actually Kim kind of alluded to it. And if you watch the campaigns that are going on now, there are a number of issues that are out there that are quote unquote moral issues, whether that is abortion, whether that is women's rights, whether that is even some people would say education, with the whole conversation around critical race theory. And I think that's a misnomer in terms of the name and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts about how the no labels or just America as a superpower can maintain and get away from the divisiveness when it seems like so much of even that center is paying attention to a lot of those kind of wedge issues, for lack of a better term, and everything, because that seems to me to be part of the problem, is that every time I turn on the TV and watch an ad, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, they are speaking to those issues and not necessarily to the pocketbook issues and those issues that I think are more important. But I just wondered your take on that.
Well, first, let's talk about what the top 3 issues are for the voters based upon the polling that No Labels has done. And the polling that we've done is much more extensive than anybody else in the country. It's 35,000 people, whereas most of the polls that you get are 1,000 to 2,000 people.
Right.
The top 3 issues for the American people are the economy, inflation, and fiscal responsibility. They're all connected together. Okay. The border security and immigration. And then America's place in the world. And by that, I mean, what is our role with regard to diplomatically and militarily with regard to the increasing instability in the world? It's not just Ukraine. It's not just, Israel. It's not just Iran. It's also, North Korea, China, et cetera. Instability in the world. So those are the top 3 issues that people care about. My book focuses on economic security, national security, domestic tranquility, and a range of issues that relate to that. As I recall, I don't think I got into the abortion issue in the book. That is a very important issue to a lot of people, but that is touched on. It is addressed in the No Labels common sense agenda because it has to be, because a lot of people care about it. Let me give you my views on it, and then First, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, and I'm pro-life. Okay, but let me come back to where I started: the law, ethics, and morality. The government focuses on the law. In my view, there's a point in time when the fetus is not viable outside the womb. And therefore, in my view, as a matter of law, not as a matter of ethics or morality, as a matter of law, up until that point in time, e.g., 15 weeks, the woman should have the right to decide what to do. And after that point, only if the life of the mother is threatened. Before 15 weeks, you'll know whether you're pregnant or not. I'm not a woman, but, based on everything I've read. Secondly, and by the way, I don't think men can have babies either. Secondly, you'll know whether it was rape.
It depends how you define it.
You'll know whether it was incest. You'll know all those things, right? And so the only thing that you really need to deal with beyond that is the life of the mother threatened because of the circumstance. And I think, look, morally, I'm anti-abortion, okay? But there's a difference between the law and morality, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I think a vast majority of Americans would probably, at least based on our polling, a vast majority of Americans would agree with an approach like that. And let me stop.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether you're liberal or conservative, it seems like we have a lot of lost time. It's only 16 years till 2040. And like our House is historically ineffective, worst in history at legislating. So can we talk about what could happen with regard, like as a liberal, I think like 4 years under Trump, that was largely lost time. I'm sure if you're conservative, you kind of think the same thing about, but like, ineffective politicians just eat up time when the clock is ticking on a lot of stuff.
Well, I think you have to be fact-based, okay? And let's talk about the fiscal issue. Debt to GDP is the key metric. And the fact of the matter is the last fiscally responsible president we've had was Bill Clinton. The last time we made real progress on trying to deal with some of our structural problems with regard to our finances and fiscal outlook was when Bill Clinton was president and Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. We actually got some things done. The first 4 years I was Comptroller General of the United States, 1998 through 2001, we had surpluses. In 2 of those years, we paid down debt held by the public, but things have been totally out of control since then. Ironically, the worst record for debt to GDP in the 21st century is Barack Obama. He has the worst record for debt to GDP in the 21st century. Trump's record was not good, but then part of that was COVID. All right. And Biden's record is not good. The biggest deficit the country has is a leadership deficit. And only one person is elected by all the people, and that's the president. And we haven't had a president since Bill Clinton who's led on this issue. And that needs to change. And quite frankly, I don't have confidence in either Trump or Biden leading on this issue. And let me give you an example why. I was a trustee of Social Security and Medicare from 1990 to 1995 before I was Comptroller General of the United States. Myself and my fellow public trustee, Stan Ross, who used to be a commissioner of Social Security under Carter, we blew the whistle and said Social Security and Medicare are unsustainable in their present form. They need fundamental reforms. The 1983 Commission on Social Security did not solve the problem because it didn't give adequate consideration to known demographic trends. And then the Medicare didn't consider rising healthcare costs, if you will. And so as a result, we blew the whistle on that. Nothing ever happened. Did the same thing in 2003 when we had a second round of tax cuts. We invaded a sovereign nation without declaring war. We added prescription drugs to Medicare, added $8 trillion in new unfunded obligations when it was already underfunded $19 trillion. So I've blown the whistle many times. And as recently as last March, I told the House Budget Committee there's 3 things we need to do within the next year. And so far, we're 0 for 3. We're 0 for 3. And I penned an op-ed this morning, to kind of reinforce that, if you will. So, we got to look at the facts, and we got to have a leader. We have to have a leader who is willing to tell the truth, make tough choices, work on a bipartisan basis, and start solving problems.
So I got 2 questions. One is there anything Clinton did that we can do that in that direction? Right. And 2, whoever gets elected is going to be a lame duck, can't run again. And so that person, if they can get Congress to go along with it, can do some unpopular stuff. So it can make some tough decisions because they don't have to worry about. So does that help? Yeah,
well, let's talk about first. Remember Ross Perot, who was a friend of mine, may God rest his soul, ran for president in 1992 and 1996. And his number one issue when he ran for president was fiscal responsibility. And things are infinitely worse today than they were back then. But that had a profound impact on both Bill Clinton as president, as well as the Republicans, Newt Gingrich, and was integrated into the Contract for America, which caused the Republicans to win the House in 1996, in the election 1996. Clinton worked with the Republicans to start engaging in reforms, including welfare reform. The truth is the government's grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget. And it's not just on the spending side, it's also on the tax side. We have $1.7 trillion a year in lost revenue because of deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions. When you count that loss of revenue as a tax expenditure, a kind of backdoor spending, when you add the mandatory spending, which is direct spending, the federal government only controls about 15% of total spending. Now, how can you call that a budget when you've written a blank check on 85%? And then when you look at known demographic trends, rising healthcare costs, and the fact that the fastest growing expense in the federal budget is interest, for which you get nothing, and now we're paying more in interest than we are for national defense. If people don't think we're out of control now, I don't know what they think out of control would be. So, it's time to get serious. My personal view, Rick, is that this presidential election, we hear it every time, is of critical importance. Everybody says this is the most important one, ever. Well, this is critically important. Whether it's the most important, I can't say. Only God knows that. Secondly, I think the Republicans are likely to take the Senate. The odds are very good for them to take the Senate when you look at the lineup of who's up and who the candidates are. And then thirdly, I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that the Democrats are going to take the House. I think it's better than 50-50. And so what does that mean? It means divided government. So all the more important why you have a president that will lead, that will use the bully pulpit to go directly to the American people and state the facts, speak the truth, willing to work on a bipartisan basis to defuse this ticking debt bomb. The other thing is, all the more reason why, since we have too many career politicians in government, the founders would roll over in their grave. They wanted people to run for office for temporary public service, not make it a career,
Right.
not to get a pension, not to get retiree health care. It's not supposed to be a job. It's supposed to be temporary public service. They would be appalled to see today. But so if we think we're going to solve all these problems through the regular order, individual bills passed through the regular order, you're smoking an illegal substance. Okay. It's going to take a commission, which I've been arguing for. And the good news is I think we got a good chance of getting one, because one is bipartisan bills in the House and the Senate, been reported out of the House Budget Committee. I think we have a good chance to get one this year, and we sure need it. Rick, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So based on the Bill Clinton model, I think Biden is in a better position to do some of that, because what happened with Clinton, and tell me if I'm wrong, he starts off pretty liberal when he gets in office in 93. His popularity is not great. He gains popularity by moving to the center. And that's what Biden has been doing on the border. First 3 years, not great on, not popular on the border. Now he's been like trying to get this border bill, this tough border bill through. So am I right? Am I off base?
I don't think Biden will be reelected, no matter whether we run a third option or not. All of our polling says Biden loses.
Yeah, I don't think he's got the brain power to do anything.
I think the reason
he doesn't.
I think the reason being is two things. The biggest concerns that people have about President Biden are something that, one, he can't do anything about, and number two, are only going to get worse over the passage of time. And that's his energy.
I will say this. I don't think Biden has the strength to carry on another term. I do think he has the strength and passion and empathy and morality, because he is the only one who pressured a bill for violence to protect women in the Violence Against Women Acts. He did this many years ago and has stayed on it. He's made sure funding would be there when other presidents didn't even care. And that was a growing problem every year. But we have bigger issues right now. And, you know, if we as an individual were this bad with our budgeting at home, we wouldn't have a home. They shouldn't have a home. They should be removed from their positions, and we should audit their books and audit the books of the IRS and audit the books of the people who took money from the IRS and find out what they did with it. But that would take a long time. But nobody audited the books of PPP loans to make sure and ensure they were used the way they were. And you know what? That was a huge debt on our country. So there is a lot of things that we are not doing. Like you said, we're at the bottom floor and just doing the minimum amount. But I think that we need to step up the game, and we need to start promoting stepping up the game, and we need to stop accepting bare minimum. And we need to tell them, if you're not doing your job, get out of the office. But I think Biden is not the candidate we need to be running, nor is Trump. Neither one of them are ethical. Neither one of them are right for office for two different reasons. But I think we need somebody with good moral standards and who's going to come in and enforce policies, put in place new policies that we need, but take a look at the budget. I think that's, and not cut things that people really need. That needs to stop too.
All
Well,
right,
let me
two
just
things.
reinforce.
So,
Rick, 1 second. Let me just reinforce. There's Biden's energy, mental acuity,
Right.
stability. It's only going to get worse over the next 4.5 years. So it's not how he is today. Project forward how he's likely to be. Combine that with who his VP is. And I don't care about her gender, and I don't care about her race. She's not competent, okay? And she is viewed as being much worse than Biden. She is an anchor, and I mean a negative anchor on Biden. And so every poll that we have says that whether it's a two-way race, three-way race, four-way race, Biden loses.
Right.
Hold on a second, Rick.
Hold on.
You had a question.
Well, two things. If you're trying to weigh which old man would be better equipped, like the media's been looking at Biden's gaffes. Trump 9 times in the last 6 months has said Obama is president. So like for every screw up Biden makes, you know, Trump is screwing up too. Second, polling. Dave, you said you polled 35,000 people to come up with your conclusions. This latest poll that shows Trump ahead, this New York Times poll, they polled 980 people on cell phones and landlines. Polling is a mess because most people don't respond to, you know, when you get a call from a polling, you don't take the call, or you say no, which means that the polls, especially the smaller polls, are contaminated with lunatics. And so you're not polling America, you're polling the lunatics who say yes to being polled. So we really don't know. And Trump so far in the 4 primaries and caucuses where there's been polling, Trump has underperformed his polls in all 4. So, you know, don't trust that.
But that, well, first, I'm not a Trump supporter. Okay. I don't want Trump. I don't want Biden for very different reasons. More importantly, forget about me. The American people don't want a Trump-Biden rematch, which is why No Labels is thinking about a third option. Okay. All I can tell you is that our polling is much more extensive. I agree with you, Rick. There are problems with polling. Ours is much more extensive. The other thing you got to keep in mind is it's a long way from November, right? So a lot of things can happen between now and November. And the third thing you got to keep in mind is our polling with regard to a third option, okay, beyond Kennedy is hypothetical, right? I mean, just suppose you get a quality candidate who's a centrist, who commits to a results-oriented agenda with a unity ticket. Would you support that? Well, it's going to change when you know who the names are, right? Once you know who the names are, you may or may not feel the same way. You may feel better. You may feel worse. You know, who knows? So we got a long way to go. I'm just saying I don't have confidence in either Biden or Trump to do what needs to be done. And more importantly, the American people don't either.
Yeah, Jacoby, thank you. Been waiting.
I was just going to say, yeah, Dave, you're spot on, because the problem with Biden is, it's very true. He has something. The problem he has is something that he cannot change and he cannot get out of people's minds. And until he plays into the idea that, yes, I'm old, yes, I may look like this, but this is my problem, or play a joke around it, it's never going to change. And people are going to believe that, oh, he's feeble-minded, which ironically, they think he's feeble-minded, but also a mob boss. But they believe that he's feeble-minded, can't do anything. And it is true. Yeah, he's only going to get older. And so in people's minds, that timeline is going to change. So, yeah, it's going to leave a lot of people home. And Kamala Harris, I think, she actually, I think, is very intelligent. However, I do think she gets that bad rap the same way coming out of California and dealing with what she had to deal with. Plus, she was harmed so much in the actual primary. And so she's not going to get a fair shake because she's tied into Biden, and that whole messaging machine, it just chugs out, and it has created a narrative around those two that it's going to be hard to penetrate. But I think it all gets back to right now, both sides have a political point that they win on. Women's issues is what the Democrats and Biden wins on. The immigration is what the Republican Party and Trump wins on. But right now, you're spot on, because the economy is. There are a lot of positives that have happened. Those positives aren't seeping into the average American. So the average American doesn't see and has a different perception of what those positives are. So, yeah, November is going to be a long time away. And yes, it's still a lot to be decided. And I think, yeah, wherever people decide to fall on the idea of what's going on with the economy, because again, if they don't see the positives, they're not going to vote for the positives. But if they do see positives, then they'll fall for it, and they'll believe and vote for those positives. So yeah, right now the economy is a huge issue.
Yeah, let me come back to that. Okay, let's talk about the economy. All right, and let's talk about where I think there's a disconnect with regard to the economy. All right, economic growth. Economic growth has been better than expected. All right, but a lot of that economic growth has been fueled by two things. It's been fueled by deficit spending, and it's been fueled by significant increases in credit card debt by individuals. So it's debt financed. So that means in the short term, it can help, but it's not sustainable over time. Number two, unemployment. Unemployment is low. It's not as low as it was pre-COVID. It's 3.7% now. It was 3.5% in November of I think 2019.
Wasn't it lower? Sorry to interject, but wasn't it lower than that? Because we've hit lowest unemployment in history. This what was it, last year? The same thing with black unemployment as well.
You can double check me, but my recollection is, and I've looked at it within the last month, that we're at about 3.7% now. We were at 3.5% in November of 2019. All right. So the bottom line is, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not saying it's, it wasn't good before. All right. Thirdly, labor force participation is not good. Okay. We've still got too many people that aren't working that should be working right now. Inflation has come down. Okay. The rate has come down. All right. But it's still going up, right? I mean, we still have an inflation. Prices aren't coming down. And what the problem is that when you look at food, energy, insurance, rent, the things that everybody has to have day to day, prices have gone up about 20% since January of 2021, which is when Biden took office, and real wages haven't gone up that much. And so, they've gone up recently, but they went down in 2021 and 2022. The market has gone up, but when you adjust it for inflation, it hasn't gone up nearly as much as it did in the last month. So here's my point. I think what's going to end up happening, my personal view, and again, I don't like Trump and I don't want Biden either. Okay, they're totally different people. I mean, I don't put them in the same basket at all. But I think what's going to happen is people are going to say, are you better off today than you were in January of 2021? That's the first thing. The second thing that's going to happen is this young lady who got killed by an illegal immigrant
Yeah.
in Georgia, there is going to be a devastating ad on that talks about open borders, sanctuary cities, and the death of this woman. It is going to be devastating.
And just to push back on that, that's where the whole the honesty comes into play again, because with the death of the young lady in Georgia, that yes, I completely agree, it'll be a political ad. But again, when do we plug in the context? And I think that's where we as the electorate miss out, because even with the death of the young lady, undocumented workers still have the lowest crime rate compared to natural born citizens. So we're attacking a whole group of individuals. And then just like what's going on with Greg Abbott has put in a law where it's your show me, it brings back the whole show me your papers act. So then that attacks minorities and other individuals who aren't even undocumented workers, but your actual citizens are being attacked because they look like so this is where I think I get frustrated at that loss of honesty in that context, because even with the inflation, we never talked about COVID, even though in 2021 we were still shut down and still struggling. So if we're talking about being better off, we forget about this context.
I want to interject on this issue about the woman who was killed. And, my prayers go out to the friends and family, the school in general. But you know what? This was a crime. And it was because the laws were not enforced the way they were supposed to. And the first thing that I reflected on, unfortunately, was Eve Carson, the young lady who was killed at UNC Chapel Hill. And the reason why she was killed was because the laws were not being enforced. And those two men were being allowed to just go and do whatever they want. They were actually pulled over that day. There were 2 warrants issued against them. And the police didn't know to arrest them. And so then that night they kidnapped Eve and put her through terror and then executed her in the middle of the street, as well as, killing another young student. This immigrant had already been arrested. So I'm not blaming just the immigrant for this crime. I'm blaming the laws that are not being enforced. And I agree with Jatovi. The crime rate is very low among the immigrant race. So this does not, and I would be, as the family of her, I would be highly insulted and mad at anyone who used this as a political gain. I think that is morally, unethically wrong to use this as a political gain, because this was not enforcing the laws against everyone. And if you treat the immigrants the way you treat Americans, maybe they would quit coming over here. Because quite frankly, it's not nice living here anymore as an American. You have to pay taxes. You have to pay for all your medical care. Your insurance doesn't pay. You have to pay more taxes and penalties. You have to pay for freaking parking in free parking spaces now, because thugs come and put a boot on your car if you're 5 minutes early leaving and they think you're not. So I'm just saying, America is not that great. And if you start treating the immigrants coming over more like you treat us, then they will slow down. But, quite frankly, what happened to this woman, if it's being used as a political game for someone to get rid of immigrants, that's pathetic use.
Yeah, well, I hate to tell you, Kim, it will be, okay. And the issue is, and you're right, you're putting your finger on something that's very important, okay. We're not enforcing the law.
Right.
Hold on. We're not enforcing the law against illegal immigration.
Yeah.
Or illegal people, period.
Correct. No, we're not enforcing the law, and that's what the focus will be on, all right? Because the law doesn't say you're supposed to catch and release.
Right.
The law does not. That is in violation of the law.
I agree.
If you want to enforce the law, use technology to get. It used to cost a lot of manpower to share information among agencies. 9/11 happened largely because the FBI didn't talk to the CIA, didn't talk to local law enforcement. They had the information, but nobody talked to anybody. But now with technology and AI and all this stuff, you can replace manpower with shared databases and enforce the law because you know more information on people. That's thing one. Thing two is a fun fact. Both these old ass candidates look like hell. Both of them have had share with me that they've had bits of their scalp moved around to make it look like they have hair. This is all hair from the back of my head that's been surgically moved around. Biden had it. Trump had a different surgical procedure. So that's just a fun thing.
Well, for the record, I didn't.
No, and it probably looks better than having like this doll hair sticking. But anyway, Biden can run on experience. Biden has 47 years of experience holding national level political office, 20 more years than any other presidential candidate in history. So yeah, he looks like a freaking old man, but he got old by gaining experience.
But the thing is, experience doesn't necessarily mean that you did things better. It just means you did the same thing over and over again, which is one reason.
Better than the guy who came in last time with zero experience. You know, the guy who had 7 infrastructure weeks.
Well, that's debatable. I would say he would have been reelected if it wasn't for COVID. He would have been the president. But in spite of that, we still are not addressing the issues. None of the candidates are addressing the issues, David. I think if a third party ran and you address the issues, which is basically our economic issues, which are, I think this country's going down the toilet. It's not, will it be a superpower? It won't be a superpower by 2040 because you're going broke at a more rapid rate than climate change. I think on the immigration issue, we need to charge the immigrants as they come in and the ones that are here. I don't know why we say, hey, you can come in, it's free. It shouldn't be free. Everywhere I go, I get charged money to fly international flights. I get charged for hotels. When you walk in the borders, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000.
Exactly.
Put fees on them if they want to come in. If they don't have the money, send them back. Tell them to go get a job in their home country, make the money, and then come back and reapply. But this whole idea that you can just walk in here free or be here free needs to stop, especially when you have a country that is Baroque with a capital B. And we need the third party for one reason: to get the other two parties back on track. All they talk about, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm for Trump, I'm against Trump. Who gives a rat's rear why the country's
You're going to need it. You're going to need a lot of money.
What policy are you for? That's what we need to start. What policy are you for?
Well, they don't discuss any policies. They don't discuss any solutions. They don't have new ideas. Frankly, I haven't heard one idea from either party in a year.
I've heard
solutions or surrender.
I've heard one idea from.
Hold on a second, it's Dave.
Hold on, I've heard one idea from both of them, which is a bad idea. Okay, and that dealing with the fiscal issue. Both Trump and Biden say, "I'm not going to touch Social Security." Now, that's a perfect example of the lack of leadership, because if you don't touch Social Security, tens of millions of Americans are going to have 20+% cuts in their benefits across the board and increasing over time in less than 10 years. So that's what their position is, okay? And that's part of the problem. Look, we have a sustainability problem. Do we have an environmental sustainability problem? Yes, but it's not nearly as great as our fiscal sustainability problem. In addition, do we need immigration? Absolutely, yes. Why do we need immigration? Because the birth rate in the United States is 1.64 per woman, which means that we would have a declining population like Russia and other places if we didn't have immigration. But there's a difference between legal and illegal immigration, and we need to be making decisions with regard to immigration more based upon the economic needs of our country.
Right.
I mean, we can charge them whatever you want. By the way, the cartels do charge them. Okay,
That's it.
I know. It's
but
$6,000.
we don't. But
to
we,
get here.
it's not
20
just
20
about
is-
money. It's about what kind of skills and knowledge do we need to compete in the global Olympics, the
Yep.
global economic.
Just to
Olympics.
Yeah.
Toby?
I just wanted to interject and just point out, Nick, we do charge them. They are charged because as an individual who's actually having a personal family member going through the whole immigration process, you're charged an exorbitant amount of money just to go through the process. So a lot of the
It's
individuals
legal.
that
Toby,
It's
that's
legal.
legal. You're doing it legal.
hold on.
That's
I get that. I get that. But you're asking poor people who've given up everything they have to pay an exorbitant amount of money that they do not even have.
No,
So we've got to
that's
figure out a
true.
situation. Let me finish. We got to figure out a situation. If you're talking about a solution, for example, we need more people to be down at the border, more legal scholars, more lawyers, more judges to go through the processing of these individuals. That's a solution that needs to happen because right now there's such a backlog of 5 to 10 years now of individuals trying to go through the legal form of actual immigration that they're taking their chances and doing the illegal form. A lot of the individuals, and we never talk about this, a lot of the individuals in terms of immigration that are over here are the ones that overstay their visas. So therefore, then they have to re-up their visas and there's no really legal process that they can go through because then they have to wait years and years and years. And that comes back on us in terms of our financial, how much is it? And you, Dave, you know this, the amount of money that undocumented workers and actually illegal immigration puts into our economy. I think Mark said earlier that it was $3 trillion. You can look it up now, and then even undocumented workers put in over $100 and some odd billion in terms of our industries alone. And that's per month, and that's local, that's state, and that's federal. So we have to look at it, and I completely agree, differently. If we're going to look at it financially, we have to think of a way to financially make it appealing and give the ability to those individuals, just like you're talking about, Nick, make them get a job. That's a great idea. But we can't make it such a hurdle that they can't get a job. And that's what we're running into now, is that they're struggling to even go through the legal process or make it to our states and cities because they're stuck in a situation where they cannot pay or they cannot do.
Toby, just understand
yeah.
that the Department of Homeland Security has admitted publicly that 80 to 90% of the people that are coming into this country illegally are not eligible for asylum.
Yep,
and yet,
I understand that.
Yet we
They shouldn't be here.
bringing them into the country, and in many cases incurring huge costs. And you're right, 5 to 7 years, you got to make your court appearance. How many are going to show up?
How do you make that see, this is where we come into the problem of the demonizing and saying that the everything else. Yes, how many are going to show up? Well, if you made the process within a year, how many are going to show up then? More. So we agree that, okay, if we actually make the pathway a little bit easier and a little bit quicker, it would allow for a lot more of these processes and those being processed to actually go through in a faster fashion, making our system a lot better, making the immigration system, sure, it could be welcoming. And just as we pointed out, there are a lot of jobs that need to be taken care of. There are a lot of jobs that we know for a fact the undocumented workers actually increase they add money to our budget, everything. I don't want to misquote, but and I hate to say it, so you guys can fact check me on it, but it's multiple billions of dollars that even the undocumented workers put into our economy. And then if you look at the multiple trillions of dollars that legal immigrants put into our economy, again, if we're talking about money, why are we ignoring the fact that this is a piggy bank that wants to be here?
Yeah,
So,
the thing is,
so the Biden's border bill increases the number of judges to judge asylum cases, so you can kick people who don't qualify out faster. So to go to a different thing for Dave, how much does it help to get rid of the cap on payroll contributions for Social Security and Medicare? And also, do you need to go to means testing for Social Security?
Oh,
Well, let me tell you what 77% of a representative group of voters supported for Social Security reform in 2012, which was also very consistent with the framework that Bill Clinton was working on before he had the Monica Lewinsky incident and got impeached. And I was working with him and AARP and Concord Coalition on it. First, you significantly raise the taxable wage base cap, which is what happened in 1983, but you don't eliminate it. Right now, it's about $160 some odd thousand. You might double it, but not eliminate it. Okay. Secondly, you gradually increase the normal retirement age for people under a stated age, e.g., 55, 2 years over about a 20-year period. You don't change the early retirement age, 62, because certain occupations won't allow you to go up. Thirdly, you increase the replacement rate or the benefit level for people near the poverty level. You decrease the benefit level, the replacement rate for upper middle income and upper income people, but you don't turn it into a welfare program. Fourthly, you change the cost of living index to make it more reflection of cost of living for seniors rather than the population of the whole. Fifthly, you have a supplemental individual savings account on top of Social Security for people who do not have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan. Sixthly, you allow for alternative investments beyond government bonds for any trust fund surplus that is accumulated as a result of these reforms. If you do those things, you can make it solvent, sustainable, secure, indefinitely.
Hey, by the way, Dave, I know we winded down just to get some clarification because it was from our show. Kate Posson is a group of Latin ladies that do their show every Sunday. But yeah, that 3.2 trillion is where I got that figure from. And apparently it is the fifth largest GDP, because I know that you deal a lot with GDP and everything in the world. So it's the Latinos in just the United States that have that $3 trillion spending power and all along those lines. So that's actually something that they bring up regularly on their show because they feel that it is not talked about enough. So I'm glad that we talked about it today and all along those lines, because it's definitely tremendous that they have that amount of power and everything. I did have a quick idea for you, David. I don't know your thoughts, but I am a fan of history. Some of y'all know that and everything. And I'm thinking that maybe we need to bring back, because I'm seeing your background and all in that. So if you are the person in charge, or if you find the person in charge, can we bring back the FDR fireside chat so we can actually learn what's going on in our government? Because I think that those were wonderful things from a historical standpoint, and we haven't had those in a long time. So what is your notion?
We're going to have to do the
fireside chat
next week because we're wrapping up. Our engineers say we have to end at the hour. So we want to thank our panelists, the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, for this exciting conversation and his new book coming out. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.